Second opportunity. That's what the Oklahoma Sooners have on Saturday. And I'm not just talking about last year where the Sooners laid a big fat egg at the Cotton Bowl and Texas just absolutely took it to Oklahoma and were able to run against the Sooners and able to stop Oklahoma, while the Sooners in that game had the mentality that we're going to ride the Ferris wheel, eat cotton candy, corn dogs, and turkey legs and fried Twinkies, and enjoy the state fair. It's almost how it looked, wasn't it? Texas looked like they were a team ready to play football, and I'm not sure what Oklahoma was ready for. Sooners have an opportunity to make amends, but also, too, a second chance to make things right from last week against TCU, in which the Sooners didn't always look like they were prepared. Players not lined up where they should be on both sides of the ball, taking unnecessary timeouts, and you still have to scratch your head about this. TCU even tried to give Oklahoma the game on a couple of occasions in the fourth quarter, and the Sooners couldn't cash in their chips. So you got an opportunity to make amends twice. Kill two birds with one stone. The Sooners and Longhorns, Saturday morning, 11 o'clock on ABC. If you're looking ahead, the Sooners game at home against Kansas State the following week will also be an 11 a.m. kickoff. That was just announced as well. Well, last season, as you know, I was incognito from my blogs. I took most of the year off because of personal reasons. In fact, I was in California visiting relatives the week of this game. So I watched the game on the tube that day, and I'm glad I was a little more than 1,300 miles away from the middle part of the country after watching that piece of crap that the Sooners displayed. Texas clearly won the game, and it was so hard for me to watch OU lose that game. But the hardest part was watching Texas just out-physical, out-muscle, and out-coach the Sooners. I don't think anybody, not even the most optimistic Texas fan, could have picked their team who had lost twice and was a double-digit underdog, beating the 11th ranked undefeated Sooners and doing it the way they did it. If that ain't motivation for you, Sooners, if that's not enough to have a good week of practice and get the kinks worked out from last week against TCU, then nothing else will work, and your season is already in the garbage disposal. And again, you can flip that switch on and get started. Sooners have an opportunity, a second chance. And I'm not saying that if they run the table, they go to the playoff. I'm not saying that, because right now that's out of their hands. Who knows? Can't control what the rest of the country is going to do. However, with a win this Saturday, and I think a win with solid execution, at least you have momentum, and at least against Kansas State, I think you go into that Wildcat game knowing that you can do it. And right now, this team needs confidence. A loss like TCU last week just absolutely shoots your confidence. It really shoots your confidence down. And the only way you get it back is one way, winning. There's no substitute for it. There's no way. There's no moral victories. This is not Pee Wee football, where you can gain a little bit of a moral victory through a loss. Not big-time college football, and not at Oklahoma. And trust me, just because Texas is a 3-loss team, just because Charlie Strong kicked 9 players off the team and had to, use that S-word suspension, and just because Texas has had injuries, don't think they're going to come to this game just looking to make it close and just looking to have a good time at the Texas State Fair while being entertainment for Oklahoma. That's not going to be their mentality. It'll be the same as last year, going and winning. And we know this because Charlie Strong's mentality is not one of Mr. Consolation. It's one of a very serious nature. And that's the one thing I do respect about Charlie Strong is his demands for his players in terms of them being better players but also better people. And that's why you're seeing the changes that you've seen with personnel at Texas, even though he's only been there a short period of time. Sooners are not always going to be a double-digit favorite against the Longhorns. In future OU Texas games, as long as Strong is there, and probably in these OU Texas games in the near future, sooner than you might think, OU, these games might be pick'em games, or if the team is favored, it might be just by a slim amount of points. Hopefully, Charlie Strong, and if I take my, dislike for Texas away for just a minute here and talk about this seriously in terms of being non-biased, I hope that the Texas administration, I hope they give him enough time to prove himself as Texas coach. I do believe that African-American coaches these days have a better opportunity to get hired to become a head football coach at major universities. But until it's proven to me, I am not completely convinced that they get as much time to prove themselves at these schools. In other words, I think that they have a shorter amount of time to prove themselves. And sometimes their bosses pull the plug on them way too soon. And that pisses me off big time. And I understand how it works. It's the billionaire boosters, and Texas has a ton of them. And some of them have old school thinking, if you know what I mean. I hope that doesn't happen with Charlie Strong if that program, after 3 or 4 years, doesn't make major progress. Heck, it took Mack Brown, I believe. It wasn't until his 8th year that he won the Big 12, and that year they won the national title. They gave him plenty of time. And all I ask, just from taking that off just for a second, hopefully, Charlie Strong, you get enough time to prove what you can do, because it sounds like from a character perspective, you're a good guy and you're doing the right thing. And the right thing isn't always about wins and losses or about the scoreboard, but it's about sticking to those core values. So from that perspective, you have to really applaud the guy. Looking at, the Sooners, Keith Ford again won't play. His injury's worse than what we thought for the Sooners. The fibula is giving him, fits. The first I heard about this injury for him a few weeks ago, they said fractured fibula, severely injured leg, but broken fibula is the official word, and they thought maybe he was going to be back for the TCU game. Maybe back for this week. And that does hurt Oklahoma, because, again, you're going to be too deep at running back, and Alex Ross has not been the answer as far as that alternative back to Samaje Perine. I think this game, you're going to see Trevor Knight run the ball. You're going to see him run. You're going to see him run a little bit more frequently. They have to. They have to have Knight run. You might say, he might get hurt. It's a contact game, ladies and gentlemen. It is. If you want Knight to be a sitting duck, if you want him to be predictable, and if you want him to not be able to be the quarterback that he needs to be, let him sit in the pocket and let Texas read him like a book and let the Longhorns pick him off. Sound like much of a game plan to you? And I'm not saying that Knight is completely innocent from last week, because he played a bad game. But don't limit his abilities. Let him roll out of the pocket. Call some design running plays if you have to. Anything to loosen the Texas defense. And I'm going to tell you right now, Texas's defense will game plan around Samaje Perine. They will do everything in their power to stop him. That's what TCU did. Perine ran 25 times and did not get 100 yards in that game. Didn't even average 4 yards a carry. TCU had the perfect game plan, and OU had no counter. Now, you might be thinking, well, Bryce Petty of Baylor didn't have a good game either. Why so hard on Knight? But the difference was that Baylor had a plan B and a plan C that worked. Yeah, Petty had bad stats, and Texas is the credit for that. But Baylor's able to run and run effectively, especially in the second half, and Baylor's defense, they only gave up 1 touchdown, which is a meaningless touchdown in the fourth quarter. So, OU had defensive problems, as you saw, and they still had a hard time running the ball. There was no plan B for Oklahoma. It was plan A or plan nothing. That was the difference between the two games. So Trevor Knight has to be allowed to be mobile. And I think, looking at my 4 keys this game, I would say for the Sooners, be consistent, Knight, okay? It can't just be about Knight running the ball. He needs to do something besides always look for Sterling Shepard. Don't forget about the tight end, Blake Bell. Utilize him. You got to utilize him as a receiver. Also, too, we're going to see if Neal and if Young become more part of the offense, because it can't all be about Shepard. Texas, I think, has a more talented secondary than that of TCU. So if Knight thought he was going to have, a tougher time throwing, he'll get pressure too, because Texas is one of the best teams in the country when it comes to quarterback sacks. They're 8th in the country in QB sacks, and they're only giving up 19 points a contest. Number 2 key, and this could really work in the favor of the Sooners. Early start could hold true. Texas is a slow starting team, offensively that is. They're only averaging 6 points in the first half of their last 4 ball games. Their offense has been terrible this year, only averaging 18 points a game, 117th in the country. They do have good running backs, yes. You know about Malcolm Brown. We know about, Jonathan Gray. I don't care if you got Walter Payton, if you got Jim Brown or Barry Sanders back there. Offensive line, if it's not very talented, if it's inexperienced, it's not going to make one bit of difference. It will not. And this is where Texas has been the most impacted with injuries and with players get kicked up the team or suspended. And losing Dominic Espinoza at the beginning of the season, after the North Texas game, hurt this team big time. He was a 40-game starter. And I know it's more than just a one-man offensive line crew. It's been other players, too, that haven't been able to play. And Texas has been very inexperienced up front. So this is a golden opportunity for the OU defense, for those guys up front to make amends for last week. They couldn't get quarterback pressure at all. In fact, I think the sacks last week, came from Eric Stryker, the linebacker. So we will see how the defensive line for Oklahoma makes amends for last week. Number 3, limit big plays. Sooners are one of the worst teams in the country when it comes to giving up those big plays, especially big passing plays. OU, be aware of Tyrone Swoopes. He's athletic. He can run. And he's a big guy, too. I think, he's like, I can't remember what his height is for a quarterback. I don't know if it's 6'4", 6'5", I can't remember. But he weighs, I think, like 245, 250. Pretty big quarterback. So he can run, but he's also a tough guy to bring down. So be aware of that. And also, too, be aware of John Harris, the receiver. He's got big playability. So that's nothing to remember. Number 4, the team who runs better in this rivalry almost all the time wins this game, especially since Bob Stoops has been there. You might remember in the early 2000s with Quentin Griffin, with QUandre Jones, this was the case. You might remember, though, when Vince Young was there, 2005. He didn't have a big running game, but Jamal Charles did. You might remember in the late 2000s, Texas, I believe, if I'm doing my math correctly, won 3 out of 4. Ground game was vital during those years as well. Last year, it was very, very big. I mean, very, very big. In fact, the running game dictated everything in Texas's blowout win over Oklahoma. Texas was able to set themselves up with 3rd and short so many times it wasn't even funny. So the running game should dictate who wins the game. Maybe the biggest stat of them all. Final thoughts on this game. Look, while I think Oklahoma offensively, they don't have all the kinks worked out just yet. And once they get Keith quarterback, things will be a little better. This week it's going to be a struggle because, Texas, 3 losses this year, but they played hard and tough in all 3 of those games, and they do make you earn touchdowns, okay? Baylor, all 3 of their offensive touchdowns last week, they had to drive the length of the field. So that puts you in perspective right there. While I don't think the Sooners are going to have a major day scoring, I do think that they will be able to move the ball a little bit. And I'm going to have the confidence that OU is going to allow Knight to run the ball a little more frequently. Not all the time, but more frequently than what we've seen. Texas's offense, right now, until it's proven to me, I just don't think they're going to be able to do much in this game because it's been a problem for them all year long. 18 points per game doesn't lie. It's going to be a low-scoring game. I think OU wins, but I do not believe that they're going to cover. I wouldn't touch that 14.5-point spread with a 10-foot pole. OU wins 20-10. And again, I don't think OU is going to cover in this game at all. It probably will not be one of the prettiest Red River Rivalry games you'll see, but if OU wins, the game might as well look like the Mona Lisa. In other words, it might as well be just as beautiful as those 63-14 games we've seen in the past. It's not going to be anything like that. If it is, I'll be stunned just because I think Texas's defense is that good. I just don't think right now with the offensive line issues that Texas has, I just don't think Swoopes is going to have a good day. And I don't think OU's going to have the best day offensively, but I think they'll have enough to get the job done. 20-10, OU in the dogfight, but I do think they get the win. My post game will be late Saturday night. Boomer Sooner.